Hello, my name is Eric. I point cameras at things and pretend that makes me an artist. So, a couple months back, I released a music video for my one-man band music project thing that you may or may not have seen, link in the description, and I've gotten some questions here and there about how I went about making it. Now, I've already done a lighting breakdown, link in the description, so this will serve as a breakdown of everything else. Costume design, color grading, green screen effects, including character replacement and adding myself into a pre-existing movie, and sound design. Concept. Originally, I was just going to record my cover of The Cure's Friday I'm in Love and have an accompanying lyric video over a Friday the 13th kill compilation. Friday the 13th, Friday I'm in Love, aren't I clever? Then I thought it'd be moderately funny to add myself to the movies, showcasing my love for Jason. Eventually, I added in milkshake dates, proposal scenes, and a full-on wedding as it slowly evolved into the abomination it is today. Gear. The entire project was shot on a Lumix S5 IIX, recording to an SSD in either B-RAW or ProRes, depending on how big the setup was. And outside of this shot, which used a Tokina 11-16, everything was filmed on a Sigma 28-70. And since my girlfriend, my brother, and myself were the only three people available to film, and there were a few shots with all three of us in the frame, I was going to be pretty dependent on autofocus. And I gotta say, both the autofocus as well as the 6K resolution for reframing in post really came in clutch. Costuming. Just off the top, I'm going to give all the credit to this YouTube video for the Jason costume. I just went about following his steps to the best of my abilities. So the Jason costume was all from Goodwill, outside of this $3 eBay mask and this fake machete from Amazon that ran me about $10. Now this lovely wedding dress was $20, so all in all this project cost me about $60. Props. For those curious how the props were made, this finger is just some rolled up clay painted brown with some white and red added in to give it a more realistic skin tone. This plate full of guts consists of a fake heart that was soaked in my fake blood concoction, and the intestines were made with balled up paper inside of pantyhose soaked in blood as well. As far as that blood goes, the main ingredient is corn syrup.
Same stuff they use for pig's blood in Carrie.
I went heavy on the red food dye, and to darken it just a bit, and to make it taste better, because a decent amount of it was going to end up in my mouth, added some chocolate syrup, and bam. Decent looking and tasty fake blood. Campfire scene. I needed a location that could pass for a Crystal Lake campsite, and I settled on my parents' backyard. It had enough tree coverage to pass for the woods, it had a fire pit, and most importantly, it had access to electricity. So, good enough. I had a few people ask me how I pulled off this machete in the face gag, and it's actually really complicated. You see, first I had to pick up a fake machete and place it on my face, then I had to grab a bottle of fake blood and pour it on my head. Then I just convulse a bit, and movie magic. Also, fun fact, before cropping to 239, the bottle is totally in the shot. But then I had to crop it out to, not break the immersion. The fishing/proposal scene. Both of these scenes were filmed at the exact same local park. The more observant among you may have noticed that this is not in fact a fishing pole. That's a stick. You make do with what you got. The proposal scene was filmed in front of this mini waterfall. The area is actually kind of pretty popular here in good old Lynchburg, Virginia, so we tried to knock this out pretty quick. The marriage scene. Now, I originally wanted to film this on top of a mountain approximately an hour away. I've done this hike before, and around sunset, the location is absolutely beautiful. Now, with the way all of our schedules worked out, we knew we'd be pressed for time to try and beat the sunset, but we found a day we thought could work if we rushed it. So we loaded up the car and sped off. Now, as I was driving, it was becoming increasingly obvious that there was no way we were going to get there before the sun set, but there was still a chance we can get some shots of the sky looking dynamic with reds and pinks, and by the time we pulled up, it was dark. Too dark to film anything of use. So I got to drive back home feeling guilty for wasting everybody's time. Just questioning why I even waste my time doing this. Nothing I do will ever really resonate with anyone. You're a failure. A fat, mediocre, middle-aged failure. Seriously, when you get home, just list all of your camera gear for sale and quit cosplaying as someone with any kind of actual talent. What are you even trying to accomplish at this point? It's like, what do you even get out of this? Anyway, I sleep it off and decide to just film locally. There's a less impressive mountain right here in town. I can just film there. Only this mountain is privately owned by possibly the most uptight college in the country. And we're going to be dressed like this. We needed to be fast. Luckily, everything went pretty smoothly, actually. I mean, obviously we're gonna get some looks, but we also got our shots, and that's the most important thing. Also, we didn't have to deal with campus security, so hooray. Color grading. So, like 95% of the people who break down how they color grade their footage, I figure I'll preface this by saying I am not a professional colorist, but if you're curious, this is how I went about color grading this particular project. So, quick example here, I normally start off by opening about 9 or so separate nodes, and on the second to last one, in place of using a standard color space transform, instead on this project, I used Filmbox Lite, which is the free demo version of Filmbox, which costs $1,000, hence the free version. So once you open this up, you go to your color space, which in this case is Panasonic Vlog, and then I'm gonna make a few adjustments here. I'm gonna drop the exposure because I exposed to the right to try to keep the shadows as clean as possible. All right, I'm gonna cool this off just a bit. Reduce the vibrancy a little bit. And then just mess with the push-pull to get it into a better spot. I like to use split tone as well, just because it gives you more of a filmic color separation. All right, now in the last tab, I'm gonna open up an instance of Dehancer Pro. Now, once you open up this, the default is set to Codec Vision 3, which in this case I'm gonna use. Mess with the push-pull a bit just to get the contrast where I'd like it. And now, I usually like using Codec 2383, but in this case, it pushes everything a little bit too blue. I want it to remain neutral, so instead I'm gonna use Codec Glossy Paper. As you can see, DaVinci Resolve absolutely crushes the black, so I'm gonna pull the contrast back here a bit. And I'm gonna boost the color density just to get some more saturation in. And honestly, this looks pretty good to me. Now, one thing that's bothering me is this highly lit area over here. So I'm gonna use a power window to reduce the exposure. So go into my Windows tab here. Now I'm gonna drop the gain, just to try to get it to match the rest of the background. And just to lower the overall exposure, I'm gonna use the offset here. And that looks pretty good to me. Now I'm gonna go into my primary log wheels and push a lot more blues into the shadows. Push a little bit more orange into the mid-tones, just to get more color contrast with the fire on his face there. And this is looking a lot better to me. Now, as you can see, this is pretty punchy and it looks a little bit too modern. I'm going for more of an 80s film look. So my last adjustment I'm going to make, I'm gonna go into my mid-tone detail and reduce that a bit. So it's reducing the detail, adding a subtle blur, and it's also got a pretty nice effect on rolling off the highlights. So, log image, film box, dehancer, power window, primary color adjustment, and mid-tone detail. Green screen effects. Like I mentioned early on, I was going to be green screening myself into the Friday the 13th movies. Now, I originally thought I was just going to be able to place myself over existing characters, but it quickly became apparent that that was not going to work. So in order for this to even look somewhat passable, I was going to have to keyframe characters out of the scene. Now, this is more easily done on static shots where the camera doesn't move. However, I quickly found out that the Friday the 13th franchise hates tripods. Seriously, almost every shot is shoulder mounted. It's ridiculous. So this is a scene where I'm going to be replacing this character. So I'm just going to dig through here, see where I can see the most of the character, and this looks good to me. Now I'm going to go into my Windows tab and go to this little pencil tool. And now I'm just going to trace over this character. I didn't try to be as close as possible. I honestly feel like DaVinci Resolve does a lot of the heavy lifting here. So once I draw a circle around him, I'm going to go into my tracker tab and do before and after, just so it tracks him throughout the duration of the shot. I'm just going to scrub through to see if it's not doing anything too crazy. And that looks decent enough for me. I definitely got into Jason's shoulder there a little bit, but I think it'll be all right. And now I'm going to link the first node with the second one. Now I'm going to go into a second tab and go to object removal. And now honestly, all I do when I go into here is I click on scene analysis and then I scroll down a bit and I build a clean plate. And this is what it did. You can see it's not perfect, but I'm going to be throwing myself into this blurry area anyway, so it's really not that big of a deal. Now, how I key myself out here, I go into my 3D keyer and just circle myself, get all the green out. I feel like that's a pretty good job. I can clean this up just a little bit. You can see some green on my shoulder here. So now the first thing I always do is just max out my D-spill. And then the only other tab I really mess with here is my clean blacks. And I'll just try to take as much green out without digging into myself as possible. And I think that looks pretty good. It's at least passable. So like I said, it's probably suboptimal, but that's how I went about green screening myself into the movie. Sound design. So, this is what the scene sounds like with absolutely no audio. Pretty terrible, right? Well, with some sound design, I can take this scene from terrible to just regular bad. Now, before doing any of the big obvious sounds, I like to fill out my room tone first. So, campfire scene at night, obviously we're gonna go with crickets and some crackling fire. Now, I'm a psychopath, so I really want to hear all the subtle and horrific details of what's happening to my face here. I'm talking about blood pouring out of my head, the blood hitting the floor, and even the sound of the machete leaving my face. Now, it may not be realistic, but it's effective. After that, I do the more obvious people sounds like the moaning, the screaming, and my body hitting the floor. And lastly, the horror movie score to just top it all off. Song breakdown. Now, I recognize that this is primarily a filmmaking channel, but I also recognize that there's a surprisingly high percentage of filmmakers who started in music production before realizing that it's #economically unviable. So I'll just quickly go over some aspects of the track because, damn it, I worked pretty hard on this. So first off, it is a cover, so I didn't have to come up with a melody or chord progressions. I toyed around with the idea of playing it in a minor key, but it kind of took away from the juxtaposition of having happy music played over people getting mutilated. And obviously, we can't have that. I sped up the tempo a bit from the original 136 BPM to 142. For the drums, I used Linn drum samples for that classic 80s sound, and then layered in a snappier snare for some extra high end, and an acoustic kick drum for some added low end. Throw in a few more 80s sounding perks, and there are your drums. Also, fun fact, this is not a shaker or a tambourine. It is in fact a seasoning bottle of Sazonador Total. It's a stupid inside joke because I once mentioned to a friend that when I cook, I throw it on everything. So now when I make music, I also attempt to throw it on everything. Anyway, it's delicious, even if it's a little bit offbeat. For the bass, I just tossed on an 80s synth patch and made it a little bouncier than the original. For the main chord progression, I went with some 80s style synths as opposed to the clean electric guitar of the original. In case you were wondering, I used the plugin Diva for all of this because it's by far my favorite analog synth emulation VST. Seriously, it's magic. For all of the electric guitar parts, I'm playing my ESP LTD H1001 into Archetype Plini by Neural DSP. All that was needed was for me to add in my unfortunate voice, and there you go. There are other parts of the song that I could go over, like how I switched everything up for this goth rock bridge, or how I used this stupid frog sound effect in this song and every song I'll ever make, because I believe FL Studio only added this preset in as a challenge to see who would be so bold, so innovative, so absolutely goddamn stupid as to use this, and I accept the challenge. Also, I like frogs. Some would say maybe a bit too much. So that about wraps it up. If you enjoyed anything about this at all, feel free to like or subscribe or whatever you feel like doing. Also, let me know in the comments if there's any aspect of creating you guys would want me to go more in depth into, because I aim to please and am desperate for your approval.
Farewell, friends.